Anyways, my name is Gandhi, by the way. I know your name is Paul, right?
That's
Yeah.
right.
So I've been actually watching your channel for a bit, I think like a few months probably. I was kind of looking for ISTJ channels and then actually found your channel and then just subscribed to you. Yeah.
Yeah, we don't really make ourselves known on YouTube very often, if at all.
Yeah. So how long have you been learning about MBTI? How long have you been into it?
Approximately since 2012. In fact, I can tell you the exact moment I first heard about it. It was September 25th,
Oh wow.
2000, September 23rd, 2012 at 7 o'clock p.m. We were at a young adult meeting
Yeah.
and these people just brought up like, well, I am an ENFJ. And I'm like, what? What do you mean by all that? And they're like, oh yeah, the Myers-Briggs. Why don't you check it out, Paul? So then I went and I was like, okay, let's look at what the four letters mean. And at the time, I said, well, ESTJ makes more sense because I can be very outgoing and people oriented.
Yeah.
But that was a misunderstanding of what extroversion means in the Myers-Briggs definition, as opposed to what it means in actual definition. So
Yeah.
then I studied the functions more and I studied the letters more, and I just realized ISTJ makes a lot more sense because I do introspect way more than I actually talk.
Okay, yeah, that's pretty interesting. What was your what was the moment when you realized that it was something that you would be interested in more in depth? If you do you remember that?
I think it was because I wanted a model with which to understand people because I've always had a hard time like grasping social constructs and knowing like what to say and what not to say. Like if someone is getting offended and it's
Yeah.
like if I knew exactly what would make people upset and angry and how they process information, then it would give me a framework so that I don't have to stretch seventh function extroverted feeling too hard.
Yeah. Do you feel like it has helped you in that regard then?
Oh yeah, it's helped me understand people, but it's also helped people understand me. Because if I just say, guys, guys, guys,
Yeah.
enough with the abstract talk, they'll be like, oh, just put up with it. But if I say, guys, 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 this is my eighth function.
Yeah.
And so people of my type in general are going to be very annoyed at you. That's where I think that's helped people because then they can say, you're not just
Yeah.
talking, you're actually providing a system, like a basis for your
Yeah.
claims.
Yeah, and it makes sense, honestly. Yeah, for sure. What you were saying about like using it as a system to understand people, I can kind of relate to that. I don't know if it's probably some of us introverted thinkers like ISTPs, INTPs, but maybe it has to do with extroverted feeling blind spot. What do you think?
I actually am not too familiar with the term blind spot. Could you explain that a bit?
Okay, so the blind spot function is pretty much like the ignoring function, right? It's like when you kind of have to do a shoulder check just to see the side your blind spot in a car, right? You're not really checking for it much, so it causes you problems. You're attributing the problems that your blind spot function is causing you to your inferior function, right?
Mm-hmm.
So extroverted feeling would be like kind of like perhaps not insulting someone or like like pretty much just violating extroverted feeling because you're not like being too aware of it. So with INTPs and INFPs, for example, they have extroverted sensing blind spots, so they're a little more passive than other people because extroverted sensing in nature is forceful, and so you can just kind of see it in these ways. Does that make sense?
So is the blind spot either the inferior or the seventh or eighth function then?
It's the seventh function, right? So, for example,
Oh,
with
okay.
ENTJs, ENFJs, they have introverted sensing blind spot. So these types are kind of prone to burning out and stuff like that. Um, ISTJs, INTJs have extroverted feeling blind spots. So when you said that you used MBTI to understand people better, I absolutely like related 100% because I've been doing the same and it has actually helped me to kind of understand, okay, this person is this type. So, you know, so it comes natural for them to talk that way or whatever, right? And then I can be a little more understanding. So I definitely relate. Um, so yeah. Did that kind of make sense about the blind spot function?
Yeah, it's just that you use different terminology than what I'm used to. Because I call the seventh function the polar function or
Oh
point of
yeah,
least resistance. I call the eighth, this is my own terminology,
yeah. Oh, I
no,
do the
not
same.
documented.
Yeah, that's the
The eighth
best.
function I call the migraine function because it's the function that when you try to use it because you're trying to speak the other person's language, you just like sort of zone out. Like I've noticed my best friend is an INTJ,
Yeah.
and whenever I ask him to remember specific details or to like organize his thoughts, he's just like, I don't even remember what I said a minute ago.
I don't, dude, I don't even remember what I did like 2 days ago. Yeah, but honestly, I remember I had a job where, it required a lot of introverted sensing, and it was really overwhelming, to be honest, to kind of keep track of the details. Like, for example, a shirt had to be ironed out, and then we had to steam it, and then we had to make sure that it was put a certain way, and then clean the mirrors, right? Make sure it's like perfect, right? But it's not just because of my introverted sensing being so low, but it's also because I have ADHD, right? So,
Mm.
but definitely, I definitely do like if I'm using introverted sensing, I think it's one of the things that drains me the most. Um, yeah. But is do you find that with that knife introverted intuition for you?
Yeah, like I'll like every time I try to talk about something abstract or arbitrary, I get really annoyed because I'm literally not comprehending what the people are saying. Like I'm reading the sentence and I'm just not taking in the words. Or I think, wait, why are we speculating about this? Why do we have to overthink this? Like, what does it matter if 1 + 1 = 2? Like, does it really need to be overthought? It just seems like unnecessary brain work.
Yeah.
And even if hypothetically there's a good reason for it, I would just prefer that other people do it and just leave me out of it. Because one of the best examples of eighth function introverted intuition I can think of
Yeah.
is at my young adult group, we were watching a documentary on St. Thomas Aquinas, who is commonly typed as either an INTJ or an INTP. And I fell asleep halfway through it because I was like, I don't get his way of thinking. I don't get his terminology. And even though he's a fellow Catholic like me, I was like, there are better ways to explain Catholicism than to be all over the place with your reasoning.
Yeah, that's so funny. Yeah, I do fall asleep when I like watch something that's too detail oriented or gives me too many concrete information, right? I'm just like, to me it's just like I don't know, it just puts me to bed too, honestly. I don't understand why. Um yeah.
Well, I think there's one misunderstanding about extroverted sensing that most people forget about, and that's because it's introverted, it obviously is very self oriented. So just because something is sensory, oops, somehow I got a hair in front of the lens.
How did you even notice that?
I noticed because there was a line going across the
I
screen, and I
I
was like, that has
noticed
to be
that.
coming from the hair.
I didn't
Well,
even notice that.
I notice
Wow.
everything.
Okay, wow.
So, well, I guess there's an example of introverted sensing right there.
Yeah.
But going back to what I was saying, introverted sensing obviously is introverted. So it's all about personal observation and personal past. So that means that unlike the ESTJs, where they value tradition for its own sake,
Yeah.
we value whatever we have noticed to work. So if one ISTJ is used to a certain way of doing things and the other ISTJ isn't, that ISTJ is going to say, what the heck, dude? That's so stupid.
Okay.
So, in the same way, if there's like a cultural tradition that I don't understand, I'm going to reject it by default because I'm going to say, okay, guys, I'm not a goat. I'm not just going to walk off the cliff because the leader does. I'm actually going to think for myself.
Mm-hmm. So what is it like what kind of observations do you really make with your introverted sensing? Like when you look at something, what is it that you see?
Well, obviously, if you're asking that from a literal perspective, I see whatever's in front of me. But I'm always going to be contrasting what I see in front of me to what I've seen before.
Yeah.
And I've heard that it's impossible to explain this to people who don't have introverted sensing in their function stack. Like even the ENFPs with their inferior can somewhat grasp it, but like fifth function and beyond, they're like, this is just too abstract for me. So the best way that I can think of describing it is either if you imagine an iPod, how you have all the different songs in a list, but you organize them based on like, oh, these are my favorites. These are by this particular artist. You take information that has a common theme and you put it all together in specific categories, as opposed to just having them all over the place and just finding it. Another example I've seen is trying to watch two movies at once. Like one version is in black and white, the other is in color. And you're like constantly going back and forth. I don't know if you can see my eyes moving rapidly, but you're like sort of able to watch them at the same time and say, wait a minute, that part's different there. Oh, how fascinating. This isn't how I remember it. And so
Okay.
I
So
actually made a video on my channel describing this in detail, and I called it ISTJs are time travelers because we're very good at going directly back to the exact moment when something happened.
yeah.
And then if something similar comes up, we're saying, oh, this is different. This person is taller now. They got new shoes. They changed their hair, different shirt. We're able to pay attention to all those annoying, pesky details that the intuitive types hate to think about.
Okay. So is it like a mind palace? You're like able to manipulate the images in your mind or something like that?
I
Like
wouldn't say
how do you like see things like you're like, okay, you had a red shirt before, right? Like how do you just remember that?
I mean, it happened, so therefore it's reality itself, just preserved.
Do you see
Kind
it
of
like a
like
photo in your mind? Is that how you see it?
more like a movie, because like I can recall the various different sensory actions I took in the moment. So like for example, if I went to a conference, I'll be able to remember the feeling of the t-shirt on my chest, the
Yeah.
feeling of my hair as it bobbed as I walked. I'll be able to recall the sensation of when my feet were pressing against the ground. And that sounds a lot like extroverted sensing when I word it like that. But the difference is that the extroverted sensors, they only focus on that stuff when it's actually happening. Once it stops happening, well, they stop thinking about it.
Yeah.
We ISTJs preserve that. And it's kind of like a movie. Like after something has been filmed, you keep seeing it over and over again. It's not like the actors are going to look at the camera and say, oh, it's 2020 now. We're supposed to be long dead. Like they're just preserving what's seen on the screen.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Do you think there's like a connection between introverted sensing and introverted intuition? Because I'll get to it. I know that they're the functions that are actually the widest apart from each other, but at the same time, they're both like two modes of perception, and they're inclined in an introverted fashion. They're going inwards, right? Um, so when you described like putting things into a certain theme, that's kind of what I do with my introverted intuition is, but with more with concepts and ideas. I'm kind of grouping them together and separating them and categorizing them, right? And that way I can synthesize them and put things together, right? But I'm really just doing that with ideas. I kind of see with introverted sensors that they're they like the routine and doing things over and over again. For me, it's very difficult, but I guess in a way that I'm doing that, it's just I'm doing that in an intuitive way because like I really just go over the same idea over and over again. For example, if I were to think about an apple, right, I'd be like, okay, an apple is a fruit. Okay, I'll look at it from another perspective. An apple is not a vegetable. Okay, an apple is red. An apple is yellow. But I'm just thinking about the same idea from like a whole bunch of different perspectives until I have like a theme for it. So in a way, it's kind of like that. But the way that I feel like it also connects is that, um, sometimes I actually use introverted sensing. Um, like I don't really have like much control of it. Like
You
if
stuttered for a moment there. Could you repeat what you said? Sometimes you use introverted sensing.
yeah, like without really trying to use it, like let's say something bad happens to me and that I don't really like I'm just trying to move on with my day, but like I keep thinking back to that memory, right? It just keeps like it keeps looping, and it's like I'm not really trying to think about that, but it keeps happening. I guess I would be kind of like introverted sensing demon, but
Kinda. Although introverted sensing isn't just about remembering things, it's about compartmentalizing personal recollections. Because any type is obviously capable of memory. If, my gosh, if people weren't able to remember things that happened, then we wouldn't be able to learn as humans. But I
Yeah.
think ISTJs and ISFJs are sort of perpetually trapped in that reality of always reliving the past, always wanting to create a cycle of doing things familiar, because the inferior function has been described as the fearful one, like the one that you are like afraid of. So in
The
our
inferior
case,
function you said, sorry?
yes, the inferior
Okay,
function.
okay.
That's often the function that we're afraid of using. So for the ISTJ in particular, when we think about the like the what ifs in life, it terrifies us and we tend to come to the worst conclusions about it. Conversely, if you take someone like the ESTJ, they're afraid of their feelings because if they do express them, they explode like a volcano, as you've probably seen in like the TV shows. When something goes wrong, they'll kick over the tables and say, everything is a disaster.
Yeah.
Because that's why they hide their feelings so much, because they, if they do unleash it, it's going to be complete chaos.
Yeah. So what do you think, like knowing your inferior function, like obviously if you're into MBTI, I'm talking generally like everybody who's into MBTI, they're aware of their inferior function. Do you think it's like the goal is to work on it, stabilize it, just focus on your main functions, ignore the inferior? What do you think is the like what can you do with the inferior function now that you're aware of if its effects?
Well, I think being aware of the inferior function has made me be more willing to be spontaneous and try new things. Like learning that that was a weakness, I thought to myself, well, I don't want to be weak. I want to be as good of a person as I can be. So if that means I have to try to get better at something, then I should try to get better at it. And I think ISTJs are the types that are probably hard on themselves the most. So a lot of times we are known for having these very creative ideas and very silly, random trains of thought. And people would think, no, that's not possible. ISTJs can't be creative because they have inferior extroverted intuition. But the thing is, just because it's inferior doesn't mean it doesn't exist. If it didn't exist, Carl Jung wouldn't have bothered putting it on the function stack.
Yeah, and ISTJs are pretty much everywhere. Warren Buffett, Jeff Bezos, John Fish, he's like a YouTuber, who goes to Harvard. Um, like who else can I think about? Right, that's off the top of my head, but guys are pretty much everywhere. Like Sigmund Freud, Tyler the Creator, rap, like they're like it's everywhere. Like yeah, it's pretty cool.
That's
Um,
interesting that you say that because I have hardly seen any ISTJs. I think the stat that we're the most common type and INFJs are the rarest, I'm like, that's bogus. I've seen way more INFJs in the world. I'm starting to think INFJs and ENFPs are actually the most common type. It's just that most of them mistype themselves. So that's
yeah,
why it comes across as they're more rare than they are.
yeah. Yeah, who knows, honestly? Like maybe you just drawn to them or they're drawn to you.
I am quite drawn to ENFPs quite a bit. Like most of my
Yeah.
best friends are ENFPs, and I just love them so much because it feels like I'm looking at myself in a mirror, like they're a complete reversal of me.
I feel exactly the same way about ESFPs. Um, I just feel that, you know, there has to be like a balance between trying to achieve in life, well, obviously trying to do your best, but also like having fun, right? Because like tomorrow is not really promised. Like no one, like people get sick, no one expects to get sick, or like random things happen in life, to be honest, and enjoyment in life is important too, and and that's kind of like extroverted sensing inferior that sometimes I just I don't focus too much on trying to enjoy my life, and I should be doing that.
But yet at the same time, what's cool about INTJs is that they have fourth function extroverted sensing, which means that it's ever so slightly higher than mine, which is fifth function. So I was just curious if you had observed those instances where you're like, yeah, I actually do have a sensing function that's higher than a sensor's version of it.
Um, I don't know. I mean, my mom is an ISFJ. So I don't really know. I haven't really looked at it. She's like I guess I can't really compare, to be honest. I haven't really noticed it. My uncle is an ESFP, and I just seen him kind of, he's in his 50s, so he's really just more drawn to using introverted intuition at this point in
Hmm.
his life. So he's just like gotten pretty deep about stuff, and he's just really helped me out with advice. But I haven't really compared to ISFJs or ISTJs. I always did think they had stronger extroverted sensing, to be honest, but I wasn't really sure. Do you find yourself struggling to use extroverted sensing?
I definitely think that it's hard for me to just completely be in the moment without contrasting. I think that when I'm enjoying something, I'm always thinking about whether it's better or worse than what came before. Like if you take my friend Teresa, who's an ESFP, like if she's doing something fun, she is doing something fun. She's not saying, "Oh, well, this stinks because last year it wasn't as good." Like that's what I'm doing, but she's not doing it. She's like, enjoy the moment, just live it.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think that extroverted sensors in general also need those sensory things. Like they almost, it's as if they're like drawing energy from it. Whereas I don't really do that a whole lot. Like I'm the type of guy where because I have such a good memory of things, that I can sort of keep it in my memory if I have to. So whereas say an ESFP or to a certain extent an ISTJ, like say they really like beer, they'll like constantly be like, more beer, give me the beer, I love it, just let me savor the flavor of it, let me just be enraptured at the moment. I'll be like, mm, beer has proven to be problematic, so I'll just toss it out.
That's interesting. So from an INTJ perspective, like how would you recommend people, like I guess I want to learn how to improve my introverted sensing, but um like in general, like how would you tell someone how to go about improving their introverted sensing?
If it's the eighth function, that might be easier said than done, but if I had to guess, I would say I think having a notebook would really help the INTJs and INFJs of the world. Like if they have a notebook like this, for example, and they write out different things to remember, and then they just keep repeating over and over again what that information was, and then get to the point where they can remember all the stuff without the notebook. So if you have to remember July 4th, 2010, July 4th, 2010, what happened on July 4th, 2010, the day of my first mission trip? I wasn't just making that up, by the way. That actually was the day of my first mission trip.
Okay, how's your trip?
It was the best experience of my life. I loved it so much. I probably would not come across as an ISTJ if I told you that story, but I definitely come across as one when I recall it because I'm always going in depth about the details of what I observed. And like, even when I'm talking about the more emotionally driven moments of the camp, I'll usually be pointing out the little details. Like I'll say, when that big life-changing thing happened, there was a green tree branch outside my window and there was a girl wearing a blue shirt on this side of me, and I'll be able to, and I'm not just randomly pointing when I'm gesturing, I'm like recalling in my brain where it was and like pointing to it in 3D space.
Okay, that's interesting. So it looks like your introverted sensing is connected to your extroverted intuition. It's kind of like your memory itself is your imagination, or the way you
um
use your imagination is in service of your memory.
yeah, I think I could agree with that because I'm currently writing a book right now, and I'd like to think that the book is very imaginative and creative and outside the box, but there's also a lot of little inside jokes in there, and I'm also, this might be a little bit of a spoiler, but a certain part of it halfway through was heavily inspired by some personal wonderful times I've had at conferences and retreats that I'm just like, I want to like put that experience into writing and make it into a cool plot twist. So I guess you could say it's impossible to use extroverted intuition without introverted sensing and vice versa. It's just that when it's so far apart on the chain, it kind of has an antagonistic relationship where like the ISTJ will be so immersed in their patterns that if I don't have my lucky charms in the morning, part of me is going to be like, darn it.
Everything is going to crazy.
I gotta adjust to something different. Of course,
Yeah.
over the years, I've learned to be a little bit more mellow about it. So now I'm actually one of the calmest people in my family. Like if I wake up and there's no milk, I'll just say, momentary setback, I'll just eat something else. But there's
Mhm.
still that little itty bitty pause of like, I kind of wanted to keep up my routine.
Yeah, but how do you feel about change? Because like for me, I kind of believe that, I would like to have the stability where I just like where I just repeat my routine, but at the same time, I'm not really sure that I found the right routine. So I'm always constantly trying to make improvements, trying to change something here and there, because I'm not because I think that that's the only way that I'll actually get to the most optimal point of, well, what my introverted intuition tells me by trying all these different extroverted sensing things. Like if this person tells me that, intermittent fasting is something that helps out with brain cognition, health, whatever, and then I try that, see how it works for me. Another person tells me I have to go do cardio every other day or whatever. I'm like trying all these little things to find the optimal routine, right? But for you, like, are you trying to also find the best routine, or do you already have it? But if you already have it, how do you know that it doesn't require any change?
I think the difference between you and me is that you seek out the change because you don't want to keep doing the same thing. Whereas for me, if I change, I have to be presented the alternative from an outside source. Is probably why it's extroverted intuition, because it's externally intuitive. So, for example, when I first started my YouTube channel, I had a pretty awful camera, but I wouldn't have noticed that it was
Mhm.
awful just by looking at it. I had to have people say, "Why don't you invest in a webcam?" And I said, "Oh,
Extroverted sensors.
that's that's not a bad idea. I could probably do that." Or
Yeah.
when, say, for example, when I started reviewing video games. Gotta love living next to a highway. A fire truck just passed by.
Yeah.
Um, I first started reviewing video games in 2016, and I had like this very ironclad format of doing it for about 2 years straight. And then someone complained, I think it was around the time that I reviewed Kirby Star Allies. They said, you know what? It's so hard to pay attention to what you're saying when you don't have a capture card to put footage of the games. So then I said, well, I guess that's not a terrible
Yeah.
idea. So, generally speaking, I have to wait for some kind of external validation that it's going to be okay to change. And I think that's where the extroverted thinking also comes in is ISTJs are very, very much the follow the rules as opposed to creating the rules, which is another reason why I realized that I wasn't ESTJ, was because I
Yeah.
was always asking, like, is this okay? Do I have your permission to act?
What if
Because
the
I don't know
Yeah.
the rules.
What if
Like,
the
what if I
rules were that
mess?
you had to keep changing? Like, how would you feel about that if the norm was that um like a person has to keep changing?
I think I would I think I would question the validity of who's making the rules. Like ISTJs don't just blindly follow the rules, they follow the rules of who's proven to be trustworthy.
Yeah.
So, for example, I will follow my youth group leader. If she wants me to do just about anything, I'll do it. But if, for example, I'm following the leader of the Marxist movement, I'd say, no, wait a minute, I haven't studied Marxism. So I might not necessarily agree with this person's ethics. So that's where the introverted feeling comes in of the, does this feel right to me? Like, does this align with my core values?
Yeah. What is it so appealing about the past to you? Because if I had to describe one introverted sensing song, I would say, have you heard Yesterday by the Beatles?
Um,
Yesterday, life was such an easy game to play. You know?
I might not have connected that it was introverted sensing specifically, but I've tried to tune out the Beatles because my dad overplayed it and I wasn't particularly fond of them.
Fair enough, fair enough. Yeah.
So again, introverted sensing is all about personal comfort, not necessarily repeating the past for the sake of repeating the past.
What if
Like,
you got used to being uncomfortable? Would that be
uh,
okay? You're just like, hey, I got to do one uncomfortable thing per day.
I mean, I feel like I am already doing that, but that's a story
Yeah.
for another day. I'll ask you a question then, since
Okay.
I don't want to blab too much.
I
So,
mean, that's the point of the podcast, like getting your perspective.
oh,
I'm thrilled
that's
to know more about introverted sensing.
oh, see, there I go again, always asking permission for everything. So, a question I have for you is obviously you and I would share the same second, third,
Yeah.
sixth, and seventh functions. So, in what ways have you seen common ground between our types with those four functions in particular?
I think perhaps when we communicate, we may not necessarily agree with each other's perspective, but we can certainly see it and understand it from a logical perspective, perhaps. Like, okay, I understand your reasoning. I don't agree with it, but I understand it. Kind of like in a professional manner, I would say it would be the relationship at the beginning if you were to meet an ISTJ stranger.
I think I can kind of get behind that. Like, my best friend is an INTJ, and I can usually completely get where he's coming from when he approaches an idea because I can say, okay, based on a rule system, he's come to it with relatively sound logic because I
So you
really don't get
analyze
introverted
these
thinking.
patterns, yeah.
I don't really get introverted thinking at all. I feel like, how the heck is it possible to view the world through your own logic? It almost feels like that wouldn't be logic by default because it's subjective. Like you
Yeah.
you have to have some kind of consistency in the world in order to perceive it. Like if my computer wasn't always a computer and it suddenly turned into an apple, I'd be like, what the heck? The computer just changed itself. So the extroverted thinking in me wants it to be consistent.
Absolutely. With introverted thinking, I think it's kind of almost annoying when I see it being overused because I'm thinking like, okay, I don't need like a whole big explainer. Like sometimes it's just as simple as saying yes, no, or you know what I'm saying?
I mean, I get my moments where I need to explain myself, but I would say that I'm pretty good at giving a concise answer, but that's definitely one thing. I'm glad you brought that up. That's definitely one thing that baffles me about anyone with extroverted feeling, no matter where it is on the function stack, is for the life of them, most of them cannot explain their reasoning. They just, you try to say, why do you think like that? Why did you just say that? They're like, well, because, well, can you expand on that? Well, you should just trust me that I know what I'm doing. Come on, just tell me why you're doing it. Well, you wouldn't accept it. And they just almost have this fear of just giving an answer as to like, well, here's my logical reasoning.
Yeah, yeah, it's pretty much like politics,
Ugh.
don't say something that's gonna end up hurting you. So a lot of it is pretty much rhetoric. So it depends if it's like pathos, ethos, logos, you know. Sometimes they'll try to nitpick arguments or find contradictions. It's just yeah, it's pretty much just being careful with your words.
If I start talking too much, just say, shut up, Paul.
No, do you
I,
worry about that a lot?
oh, yes, I worry about that all the time because that was something that I was told a lot as a kid. Like, I would be
Yeah.
super passionate about what I like, and I'd start telling people about it, and they'd say, stop dominating the conversation. And that was one of many reasons why I thought I was ESTJ,
Mhm.
because I was like, I like to talk, I like
Yeah.
people, so I must be an extrovert. But then when I studied the functions more, it started making less sense. Like, inferior feeling didn't seem to fit because I was like, for crying out loud, I feel things and I get upset. And for crying out loud, I think I get more upset than some feeling types at times. I just know how to rein it in and not necessarily jump into every single emotional impulse. Like if I did that, ugh, my life would be a mess right now. Like
Yeah.
there are so many things I want to do, but then I think it through and I say, that might not be better in the long run if I go off of that emotion. Like earlier today, to give an example, I just found out that because Nintendo's doing an expansion pack for their online service, and the original online service was $20. So the benefit of this next one is being able to play Nintendo 64 and Genesis games via a Netflix style subscription service. They're charging $50. So going from 20 to 50, I was outraged. I was scandalized. And I said, I just want to go on Twitter and hashtag Nintendo and tell them how annoyed I am. And then I thought about it and I said, nah, there are better ways of protesting. Whereas I think the introverted feelers wouldn't be able to contain their impulses. They would just say, like, F you, Nintendo, you're the worst company in the world. And I'm just like, mm, even if I did hypothetically do that, I think I'd just say, like, Nintendo, I'm disappointed in you, and just make it very calm and collected. And the ESTJs are kind of not like that. They're a lot more rude, a lot more emotionally constipated than me. And then also, like, when I was recalling details, they would always say, like, oh my gosh, that's too much to remember. And I'd be like, how is that too much to remember? That's your secondary function. They're like, no, that's more likely what an ISTJ would do.
Yeah.
So when I realized that I was too emotional and too memory oriented, but also not so based on tradition and more averse to change, that made the ISTJ function stack make a lot more sense.
Okay, that's interesting. So, like when you're communicating with an ESTJ, um, do you usually try to like help them see your point of view through your detail orientedness or your extroverted thinking?
I mean, I don't talk to ESTJs too much, so I'm not really sure how to answer that in practical terms, but
Uh-huh.
I do tend to impress them a lot with how much I know. Like from the few ESTJs that I can think of in my life, they seem to really get a kick out of like the stuff that I know. Like they'll say, oh my gosh, I didn't even know that, because they tend to pride themselves on always being right.
Yeah.
So when I am like more right than they are, it takes them aback and they're like impressed by it. Kind of like how they say to win an NT, in this case, meaning intuitive thinker, because in the autism community, it also means neurotypical.
Okay.
So that's why I'm differentiating in case there's like autistic people watching this that are like, what? But
That's
anyway, within the intuitive thinkers of the Myers-Briggs, they say the best way to impress them is to outwit them in a logical debate. So it's kind of
uh,
like that with ESTJs too, I would say, because their
mhm.
thinking is so dominant. But I think I've also heard that we secondary thinkers can intimidate them a bit because their feeling is so low
Yeah.
that they're like going to be like high strung about it when you do activate it. Like one example was when I was taking a ride with my ENTJ friend, and she saw that there was a fly on her windshield. So she turned on her windshield wipers to get rid of the fly. And I said, you cruel ENTJ, how dare you be so callously murdering that fly? And she just got so flustered by that. She's like, it was just a fly. And she was like so defensive. It
Yeah.
was like, chill out. It's just a joke.
No way, that's so funny. So let me just think about here. Yeah, I feel like I just got sucked into your world, like introverted sensing, and there's just so much going on that like I can't even think about the future at the moment, you know?
Yeah, I definitely don't think too hard about the future. And if I do, it's usually just I hope that it can be more of what I'm currently doing. Like when I think about the future of my YouTube channel, I just say, well, I hope I'm still reviewing games 10, 20 years down the line.
So your
Uh,
happiness is right now. You're pretty much happy like right now, right?
yeah, I would say so. I mean, obviously life's not perfect, but
Yeah.
being a Catholic, obviously I have faith in God, and that's my stability for the future. Like
Yeah.
if I imagine if I didn't have that, I'd be one of those grumpy ISTJs that just sits in the chair and never goes out and experiences life. Because if they don't have that core value system to, I'm going to sound like an intuitive when I say this, to anchor themselves in, they're just not going to want to try anything. Whereas I can say, okay, well, I've got my faith to back me up. So I think it might be okay if I try this mission trip, if I try jumping in the swimming pool, like
Yeah.
certain things in my life I've been able to improve on because I had that fail safe. Like
Yeah.
ISTJs, if we do change our routines, it's usually a calculated risk. So that's why most of us don't like going to the casino, because they're so rigged that the odds are against us.
Just
So
to interrupt you there, I've actually like seen a really interesting thing where I've seen extroverted intuition inferior is kind of like gambling. I don't know if you've noticed or if this is even true, but I've just noticed that there seems to be a, you know, well, people with extroverted intuition seem to like gambling for some reason.
That sounds so stupid to me because I would say, why would I want to risk losing money? I want to be able to make sure that I'm getting something out of this guaranteed. Like I wouldn't go to the store and go up to the GameStop clerk and say, give me the newest game. And they're like, well, there's only a 50% chance that you'll get this game, but pay me up and you might be able to get it. It's like, no, I'm
Yeah.
paying you money now. Give me the game now. It
Yeah.
just seems stupid that I'd have to risk something like that, which is why I often don't buy games very much anymore. Instead, I prefer to use a rental service so that I can try the game. And if I don't like it, send it back.
Okay. Um, have you have you heard about the four sides of the mind theory?
Can't say I have.
So it's pretty much C.S. Joseph. Have you heard of C.S. Joseph?
I've heard of him. I haven't watched him much because his videos tend to be kind of lengthy.
Yeah, so he's pretty much a controversial figure amongst the MBTech community, like I guess whatever, but I personally found that what he has said has helped me in a lot of ways. So I guess I would have to say I would try my best to support because I'm like a loyal guy, right? I'm not going to just do what popular opinion likes, but something that has resonated with me is that he pretty much says that we're able to tap into like four different sides of the mind, right? So he would say that my unconscious, for example, is ENTP, and my subconscious is ESFP. So I can pretty much tap into those, and I've kind of felt like it resonated with me. In the past, I like when I first did my MBTI, I thought I was ENTP for the first maybe year and a half, just because I just like I didn't see myself as an introvert or a judger even, because I thought, hey, judges have to be like really organized, like really like one track minded, and I am one track minded, but like I'm also a troll. Like I like to have fun a lot and just play around. Um, so what was I saying before that? What was I saying before that?
Well, you were talking about how extroverted intuitives sometimes like to gamble. And then we got on to the four sides of the mind and
Oh,
C.S.
oh yeah.
Joseph.
So have you ever noticed like yourself maybe even acting like an ESTP or perhaps acting like an ENFP sometimes?
ENFP, yeah, like all the time. Like when I'm with my sister, when I'm on mission trips, I can be very, very funny and boisterous and just get everyone in the room laughing because I love telling jokes. I'm constantly telling sarcasm when I'm on other people's streams, and I don't like cliches very much. Like when I'm writing my novel, I'm actively fighting the hero's journey template
Mhm.
because that's like the way that every adventure is supposed to go. And I'll be like, says who? That's not my personal opinion.
Yeah.
So I like that innovation. And you may have noticed that even though my channel has like different sub series,
Hmm.
sometimes I'll just pull out these really oddball videos. Like right now, I'm working on a video called Every Female Appearance in Smash Brothers Reveal Trailers, where I'm taking, because like everyone's done these are all the Smash Brothers Reveal trailers. Boring, boring, boring. Let me only point out when the females showed up so that that's a more interesting spin on it.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's one thing I like to do is I like to show off that silly, goofy side of me. But then the ESTP, I see that when I'm either enjoying a pizza or I'm at the amusement park because I'm just, woo, let's party. And if I see a
Yeah.
bounce house, I am going to want to go in that bounce house.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's pretty interesting. Um, so you have noticed yourself acting like an ESTP sometimes?
Oh, yeah, I've definitely said that I probably would have been an ESTP if life circumstances hadn't caused me to be more reserved. Because I think to a certain extent, our childhood defines our type. Like, I'm
Hmm.
pretty sure most ESTJs were turned ESTJs because they were part of a community that had their traditions and they wanted to uphold it. Whereas
Yeah.
I think ISTJs were in communities where they constantly did things the same. Now, I could be wrong about this. This is just off the top of my head,
Yeah.
but it's definitely something that I've noticed tends to be a pattern among my friends. Like my best friend, the INTJ, he was taught about philosophy and Socrates and Plato when he was 5. So it's like, could that be why he's an INTJ now? Was because he was exposed to this kind of deep thinking before he was even the age of reason?
That's an interesting theory for sure. I mean, that would be your environment shapes your personality, or your personality shapes your environment. Like you kind of have to believe one or the other. But I wouldn't really be sure which one is right.
But to go back to something you said earlier, you mentioned that you had a hard time seeing yourself as a judger.
Yeah.
And that got me to a new realization that I'm trying to raise awareness of in the Myers-Briggs community. And that's that socionics actually defines the introverts with the opposite last letter that Myers-Briggs does. So technically, you and I are ISTPs and INTPs. Why? Because we lead with a, a gathering, taking in information function.
Yeah, perceiving function.
So, like, if you were to take us versus our ENTJ and ESTJ cousins, you'll notice that they are very uptight and need to have things under control. And the slightest bit of chaos will cause them to throw a fit. Whereas we
Yeah.
could say, okay, I'll go with it. You see how
Yeah.
there's that analyze first, which is the definition of a perceiving function.
Yeah.
But for the extroverted types, it makes total sense. The EP types are going to be like, ooh, let's experience, let's gather. And the judging types are going to be, let's enforce, let's do this. And but you notice the IJs are the ones that put their hand on their chin and say, interesting. Let me think about this more, which is perceiving. And the IP types are going to be like, this is what I believe. I will not be swayed from my belief. Very much a J type.
That makes a lot of sense. I guess at some point in ISTJs and INTJs, INFJs, and ISFJs do look like judges, like as they grow older, just because that second function is gonna start, being relied upon more. Um, I just being in university, I'm actually having to keep myself more organized, be more proficient with my time, and try to get more things done, and just have good time management skills if I want to get more things done. Like I guess the more that I use extroverted thinking, the more uptight I may become. And there has and if we watch movies or TV shows which have the same characters as us, they do seem pretty uptight. So I guess at some point in our lives we may become that way.
Yeah, I think for me it was the other way around, where I used to be very uptight and
Yeah.
rigid and had to do everything the same. And then as I got older, I started to realize that there's value in being different. And so sometimes I just do things that would have upsetted my younger self. Not always, but sometimes I'll just say, you know what? I usually go to the park when I take a walk. Today, I'm going to go to the cornfield. And that's like deliberately challenging my childhood self because I used to always take the same path every single time I walk. And most days I do go to the park when I walk, but every now and then I just say, you know what? It's okay to change every now and then. But
Yeah.
it's the key word is every now and then. If I were saying ENFP, they would always want to change.
Yeah, yeah. So my brother is actually ENFP, and
Hmm.
he seems like the most ISTJ ENFP ever. Just because he's so used to his routines, right? Like he does the same thing all the time, and he will not be swayed on his routines. And he likes to work out a lot. Like you would think he was a sensor just by how much he likes to work out, and he's like really serious. Like he doesn't really joke around that much anymore. I guess maybe like doing an engineering degree may have contributed to that, but he's just more serious as a person, and it's just really, really, really interesting to see, to be honest, because he was a completely different person before he went into university, more laid back and joke around, even going back to when he was younger, like he was just more like stereotypical ENFP. But then after engineering, where he just seems more ISTJ, to be honest.
I
So
think there's definitely, I think that's really cool that as we get older, we start to appreciate our opposite type more. Because
yeah.
I can like admire ENFPs so much now, but when I was younger, they drove me crazy. Like I was just like, how can you be so sporadic and forgetful and like unpunctual? But now, I mean, I still don't really like it when people are forgetful or unpunctual, but now I can
Oh,
be like,
I hate it. I hate it. It's the worst. It drives me insane. Like if we're gonna do something, like please like show up on time or something, because I'm planning everything already. Like, hey, we're gonna meet at 11 a.m. tomorrow. Okay, that means I can study till late. I can get some hours of sleep. I can wake up at 10, get some breakfast, and that way when you come, I'll be prepared. I have a showered. Um, but if they come late, now I'm like waiting and now I don't know what I'm doing, and now I just lost 2 hours or something like that. Like, yeah, I love just punctuality and all that stuff, you know.
yeah, I can totally relate to that. Like
He's
I,
like
if
yeah, like people that are too on the perceiving axis, they do drive me a little bit insane. I'm not gonna lie. I don't like that much. I need some sense of stability with people.
Well, one thing that I've learned lately with considering that most of my friends are perceiving types is I've learned to do what's called structured spontaneity, where I
Yeah.
say, like, okay, I will give you 2 hours where we just will not have an agenda. But after that 2 hours, I'm going back to my way.
um
And that also really helped when I chaperoned conferences and retreats and mission trips, because they would give me the agenda and they'd say, like, at this point, we will have surprises for you. And I'd say, okay, I'll be open to whatever they have in mind for these 2 or 3 hours. But then after that, I'll be happy to know that that'll be resting time and this will be bedtime and breakfast time. So that really helped me to plan out my more spontaneous moments.
Yeah. So just nearing the end of the interview here, I kind of just wanted to talk about some things on my mind. So first of all, I highly respect the ISTJs, like just amazing. Like Jerry Seinfeld, like biggest comedian ISTJ. Like the McDonald's system, like fast food system was pretty much invented by an ISTJ. If you watch, have you seen the McDonald's movie? The founder?
Can't say I have. I don't watch too much TV to begin with.
Okay, so the people who created McDonald's were an ESFJ and an ISTJ, and the ISTJ was the one that created the efficient like system where it's like, hey, I'm coming through, or like hot or whatever, like that system in a restaurant, right? In like a fast food restaurant where they like how they one person gets the patty so that person can put the sauces so the person can wrap it.
I mean, I used to work at Culver's, but I never worked in the
Yeah.
kitchen. I would just observe like the monitors that they had above so that they would know what orders to make. So I know it conceptually, I just don't know it personally.
Yeah, so it was an ISTJ who pretty much designed this system that has now spread to like being pretty much normal in fast food restaurants. Um so it's pretty amazing because when an ISTJ kind of thinks of an idea, right? It seems to kind of resonate in the extroverted intuition where it just spreads to so many people, you know? Like, does that make sense? Like it just becomes universal, and it's pretty interesting. Even with Amazon, like I like Amazon is huge. It's amazing how how we're able to just buy things off of Amazon. Like it's just with a click we can just get it. We don't even have to worry too much nowadays. Like everything is so simple, and we can get most of our things through Amazon. It has like music, TV. It's pretty amazing. Like the marketplace has existed for forever, but now it's just been redesigned to a modern time.
Yeah, I definitely get what you're saying about ISTJs having a ripple effect because I feel like my mannerisms are so distinct
Yeah.
that people either begin talking like me or they can't help but think about me when certain things come up, even when they're not with me. Like, for example, my friends will sometimes say, like, Paul, I saw a blue flower today and I just immediately thought of you because your favorite color is blue. Or I have other friends that will say, like, I got pizza today with my husband and I started thinking of you because your favorite food is pizza. So now I think I'm at the point where people know how much I love Banjo Kazooie so much that it's impossible for them to play Banjo Kazooie without thinking, like, Paul's probably in seventh heaven right now.
Yeah, I definitely see ISTJs being pretty cool. Like, I'm not foolish enough to think that there's one good type or one is better than the other. Like every type has its own strengths. And so I kind of want to improve all my functions if that's possible. So now that I've gotten to introverted sensing, it just has helped me realize how amazing ISTJs and ISFJs are. They're like pretty much the backbone of society that has allowed us to keep civilization stable and actually functioning. And habits are important. Like if you want to be successful in anything, it's your habits. And who has the best time learning habits or just sticking to habits? Introverted sensing, right?
Yeah,
So
that's true. Yeah.
yeah.
Although backbone of society, I think we're more of the backstage men of society because we don't. The thing about ISTJs is they're so smart and creative, but because they're so hard on themselves, they usually don't get the recognition they deserve. Like, I actually, to combat that, I'm actually planning on making a video called I'm Paying for My Own YouTube Channel
Yeah.
to showcase that I work so hard on my projects, yet I don't get paid a penny for it, that I'm actually paying money for a lot of my upcoming projects.
Yeah.
So that's like my way of saying, you guys are telling me I'm too hard on myself. You guys are telling me I should pat myself on the back. Well, guess what? That hurts.
So you have some loyal followers. So,
Oh,
so just
yeah.
just like 10 more minutes probably, and then that should be fine. But yeah, if you have some loyal followers, you're kind of interested in making some money, because honestly, like if you're doing something providing value to people, you should be getting rewarded for that. It's just like universal law. Like it's just the right thing to do.
It's a matter of how to do it. That's the
Mhm.
problem. Like, that's
Yeah.
usually the biggest hurdle in me accepting criticism is like, or not necessarily criticism, but like suggestions to change. Like, my brother was like, Paul, you've reviewed almost 300 video games, yet you've
Yeah.
never gotten paid for it. Why don't you get a job as a reviewer? I'd say, okay, tell me how to do that. Because our intuition is so lousy that we can't figure it out on our own. We have to be told how to do everything.
Yeah. So I went on an extroverted sensing like information hunt pretty much, where I was like trying to learn like different things that are other people are doing. And so here's kind of what I gathered is that have you ever heard of Patreon or Buy Me a Coffee?
I tried doing Patreon, but it was so confusing that I just gave up on it. If I do it, I'll just probably
Yeah.
have my brother teach me how to do it.
Yeah, so Patreon, Buy Me a Coffee, you can pretty much just set up your page there, and you can even make exclusive videos on there. Like let's say you want to do a topic that you think is too controversial for YouTube or something more personal, you can upload it to followers who have paid like maybe $2 per month or whatever, right? Just to be able to access those exclusive videos. But these people that are your loyal followers that have stuck with you, they can also donate to you to show you their support. So that's one way of like getting rewarded for your efforts. Or affiliate marketing, where you take something from the internet and you just post it on your site, and that way you get percentage of every person that buys it or something like that. Like there's definitely like a lot of ways to make money off of YouTube, and I think it'd be cool to see you do that too.
The methods of people making money off of YouTube is what I disapprove of, though. Like Patreon, yes, I can kind of get. But one thing that I kind of get really annoyed by when I'm watching YouTube, because I like to watch YouTube as a hobby,
Mhm.
um, I get really annoyed when people always ask for a like and subscribe because it's like, are you telling me that I'm a
Yeah.
dummy, that I don't already know that that's an option? And it also comes across as though they're desperate. Like, if you don't like and subscribe, then I will be very upset at you. And it comes across as emotional manipulation.
Yeah.
Whereas I don't actually care if people subscribe to my channel or not. And in fact,
Yeah.
there have been people that, like, when I tell them I have a YouTube channel, they're like, oh, good, I'll subscribe. I'm like, wait, wait, wait. don't subscribe yet. You haven't even watched my stuff. They're like, well, Paul, I know you. So obviously I'll subscribe. And I'll be like, no, 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 no. Subscriptions are when you want to see more of the person's stuff. I don't want to bother you with my notifications if you're not going to watch my stuff. So
Mm. And
that's a
and
plea to your audience right there. Like, don't subscribe
yeah,
to me unless you like my stuff. Like, if you don't like it, don't subscribe.
yeah. Yeah, it also has to do with like the way that the YouTube algorithm works because
Uh,
I recently just found this out is that the way that a video grows is with the amount of likes that it has. So I guess I have to start asking people to not ask, but I'm just saying, hey, did I give you some value? Give it a like if it has helped you, if you liked it, if you enjoyed it, if it has given you value. Right. So yeah, I think it's gonna be interesting to see. I mean, you're an ISTJ, I'm an INTJ. We find ways to be productive in growing our whatever we do. So it's going to be interesting to see what we do. But yeah, just to finish off, do you have any like last questions?
I think the last question I want to ask is, are you aware of the true definition of introversion versus are you aware of what people think it means? Because I think that's one thing that people misunderstand about ISTJs and INTJs is your first letter is an I. That automatically means you're going to be quiet.
I guess get energy being alone. Is that what it would be?
More or less, and you get energy by being able to be more introspective and think things through on your own as opposed to always needing external validation.
Oh man, if I go too long without it introspecting, it drives me nuts. I honestly like I just get so cranky if I haven't had the time to introspect.
Me too. Like some back when I was actually dating, sometimes my girlfriend would come over and I'd just be like, I'm tired. Can you go in the living room so I can take a nap for an hour?
Yeah.
So sometimes even when I'm in company, I'm desiring to be alone.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe like one day like I'll find someone that I enjoy being with, but like being around someone for too long is not something that I enjoy too much.
Yeah.
I think just because I'm always thinking like, okay, I want to do something like I want to be improving something that's individual. That's probably why. But
Yeah, like for me, I like the thrill of common interests. So like if I'm, say, in a room full of Banjo-Kazooie fans, I will act like an extrovert because I'm like, yeah, baby. You probably saw my amiibo of Banjo-Kazooie too. Like,
yeah.
I'm quite a diehard fan of that game. So I think for ISTJs, they like common interests. And for INTJs, I think they also like common interests. But for them specifically, it's more of common ideas and common methods of philosophizing. Like my best friend, he likes being around people who can keep up with his theories and he likes people that challenge his brain.
Yeah. When I talked to my INFJ friend, like we were just spinning theories back at each other. And I think we ended up talking for like an hour. Just we were just enjoying each other. Like it was, yeah, it's interesting because I don't expect that I could talk about like the things that I want to talk about with many people, right? So I'm just like I think growing up I was just like kind of a little bit insecure that when I talked like things would get like too deep, right? And then there'd be like someone that would be like just like, hey, like relax, let's just have fun, you know?
Well, hey, if all else fails, just put googly eyes on your hat and people say, oh, you're a fan of Super Mario Odyssey.
Yeah, well now I'm a little bit more like interested in being funny. Like I don't have to sound smart. I can just say gang. Like I can just act silly sometimes, you know? Like sometimes I can just say swag, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Does your INTJ friend do that sometimes? Does he just like feel himself sometimes?
Yeah. Well, he doesn't do that, but he has his moments where he just gets really silly or he'll just blurt out a line from a movie he likes just out of nowhere. And I love that about him. He's not as silly as me, like, because he doesn't use extroverted intuition. And sometimes I can like completely throw him off with my jokes, but he has his moments as well.
What is he like when he uses extroverted sensing?
He tends to just get over absorbed in the pleasure of things. I don't want to get into specific details because that might be violating his privacy, but
Of course, yeah, no
like
worries. Do what you
if
feel
he
is right.
likes something, he goes overboard in liking it. Like he might say, hypothetically, not saying this is what he does, he might like get a pillow from the store and then like hug it for 5 hours straight because he's like, I need to feel that sensation on me. Whereas for me, I might like hug it for a couple of seconds and say like, okay, I'm good.
Yeah. Okay. Oh yeah. So some things that I noticed, like I don't know, if it's introverted sensing, but like I don't like eating the same thing over and over again. Like if I ate like let's say, eggs today, like I don't want to eat it tomorrow. Like I need
Yeah,
something that
I can't,
changes.
I
Like I
can't
don't.
do that.
You can't do that. Like,
No, I can't do that. I have to have the same thing whenever I go to a restaurant.
oh,
Sometimes I'll splurge on a dessert, but I will always have the same main course.
yeah. Are you a picky person when it comes to food? Because I'm super picky. Like there's just so many things I don't like. Like my sense of taste is like really sensitive. So I guess I might be
Hmm.
extroverted sensing being low because I'm like I can just like I'm really sensitive to like tastes. Um, like if I'm trying a dish of food, I can kind of tell what's being put in it. Like, hey, this has too much salt, this has garlic, this has like I can kind of tell.
Hmm.
Um,
Um, I th I don't think I'm very picky at all. I think I can eat almost anything, but there are certain things like being an introverted sensor, I can like put everything in categories. Like I can say this is like amazing, pretty good, decent, tolerable, awful. Like I can have different tiers of where I find each food. And my mom sometimes even remarks that when I'm eating dinner, I'll eat the food in order from what I like the least to what I like the most.
that's so
So
cool.
she's learned over the years to arrange the meal so that she'll say like, okay, Paul, I'll first give you the peas, then I'll give you the chicken because I know you like the chicken better than the peas so that I won't make make you eat something out of order.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Well, yeah, I said the interview was over like 10 minutes ago, but I ended up enjoying myself a little bit too much, so it went a little bit over. So I apologize for that. But
No worries, it was great. I really appreciate this is the audience probably doesn't know this, but this is the first time we've talked and it's like it feels so natural. Probably because the mutual middle functions really help.
yeah, yeah, I pretty much enjoyed talking with you too. But keeping up with the extrovert introverted sensing, it does make me stop a little bit and think a little bit more because like when you're talking about a lot of concrete stuff, it kind of puts my mind blank. And so
That's so funny because I don't know how to talk. I don't know how to talk any other way.
yeah, yeah, because I'm just like I'm always like thinking about like a whole bunch of different things and ideas. So when I hear you talk about like a concrete example or something, right? Now I'm just thinking about that concrete example and just trying to picture it and then so then my mind goes blank because I'm just so stuck in details.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I guess if you ever want to know more about introverted sensing, I have a playlist on my channel called ISTJ in well, I haven't made that its own playlist. That's in my
Yeah. Oh, I
Myers-Briggs
will definitely do
playlist.
that. Um,
ISTJ info dumping. I talk all about the ISTJ function
yeah.
stack.
Please make a video on like how to get better at introverted sensing for us that forget things a lot.
Okay, yeah, I can do that.
I
Sure,
will
not a
watch it
problem.
100%.
I think you forgot to click off of the recording, so we should probably say goodbye to the audience.
Have a good rest of your day, Paul.
Thank you. You as well. Have a good day, audience. Thank you so much for watching and listening to us blabbing for over an hour.
Yeah.